Now, Curtis, right? Curtis, Moses' other grandson, the one that called his mama to tell her what happened to Emmett, and then his mama told Mamie what was going on. So Curtis goes like this to Mose: "You're gonna bury Emmett and not tell his mama?" And that's when Mose told everybody to stop. Let's call Mamie. They called Mamie, and when she heard about it, she asked the local undertaker in Chicago for help to bring Emmett's body back home. And the undertaker in Chicago made some calls and got the body sent back to Chicago. And look, when Sheriff Strider heard that they sent the body back to Chicago, he was furious because he wanted that body buried that day. So they sent Emmett's body back to Chicago, right? So his mother could have the funeral there. Now, when Mamie got his body back in a big pine wooden box, it was sealed and nailed tight with 3 big padlocks on it, intended for it not to be open. And the reason why they did it like that was, for one, they didn't want nobody to see how bad the body was. And for two, that was part of the deal that the undertaker in Chicago had to make with authorities in Mississippi, as a promise that they wouldn't, under any circumstances, open the coffin, and they had to sign affidavits and everything. They didn't want that coffin open for nothing. And the undertaker told Mamie that they gotta bury the body as is. That was part of the deal. They gotta bury the body as is. But that's when Mamie demanded that they open the coffin. She wanted that coffin to be open because she really wanted to make sure it was her son Emmett in there. She said she don't know what's in that box. It could be rocks. It could be another body, whatever. So she told them, "Give me a hammer. I'll open it myself." And that's when the undertaker said, "Okay, I'll tell you what. You go home, and tomorrow, I promise you, I'll have it open so you can see the body." So the next day, they let her know that they got the coffin box open. And Mamie said she can smell the foul odor from 3 blocks away before she arrived. That's how strong it was. Now, when they opened the coffin, according to Mamie, she said the world didn't see the original body, how they sent it to her. The picture we saw is that picture we saw is way better and viewable than what they saw. Because after they fixed them up a little bit, it was still terrible for the world to see, but she said what she saw, because look, the undertaker asked her, did she want him to try to fix the face up for her? And Mamie said, nah, she wanted it to be an open casket funeral and wanted the world to see with their own eyes what they did to her 14-year-old son. But they had to fix it up. They had to fix it up because it was too bad. And Mamie said she thanked the undertaker. He did a beautiful job, she said, on him, because if people would have seen the original body, they really would have lost their minds. Now, the original body and what Mamie saw, right? She said she saw his tongue hanging down off of his chin. One of his eyes was hanging down on his cheek. The other eye was gone. It wasn't even there. His nose, she said, looked like they chopped it off. It was chopped all up or something like that. All his teeth was gone, except two of them. One of his ears was missing. And then she said she saw a gunshot wound to the head. Now, when she saw the hole in his head, that's when she really became upset, saying, was it really necessary to shoot him after they did all them other things to him? And then she said it looked like they chopped his head in half with an axe. Wow. And you know, tens of thousands of people lined the streets outside the mortuary to view Emmett's body. And Days later, thousands more attended his funeral at Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ. And the world got to see how bad his body was, especially when Jet Magazine snapped that picture with Mamie standing over his body. They say that picture became one of the 100 most influential images of all time. That picture was crazy. And the funeral, they say, was crazy sad, and people was crying, falling out, outraged. They couldn't believe they did this to a 14-year-old boy. And they say a crowd of over 50,000 was there, and over 600,000 people passed by the funeral. Wow. That's a lot of people, y'all. Now, after that, right, back in Mississippi, the sheriff who identified Emmett's body stated out of his own mouth that the case against J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant was pretty good. But then once the KKK put pressure on him, he changed his story up, saying he doesn't think that was the body of Emmett Till. And look, he said the recovered body they found in the river probably had been planted by the NAACP, and then they put a ring on the finger to make it look like it was Emmett. He blamed them. He blamed the NAACP. Wow. He also said he think Emmett Till is still alive somewhere. But look, J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant were indicted for his murder, which surprised a lot of black people in that town. They couldn't believe it because the whites were so used to getting away with murder down south. At first, they couldn't get nobody to represent J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant as their lawyers. But then the town came together and donated over $10,000 to help for their defense. And they had like 5 lawyers. Now, when it was time to go to court, the whole world was tuning in to see what the outcome was going to be. Black reporters, white reporters, worldwide news press were all over Mississippi. And Mamie, she was getting all types of death threats from the KKK and the white supremacists. They were saying she better not show up to court. They was going to bomb her house. They was sending her letters of body parts and everything, saying they glad Emmett was dead. Man, it's crazy, man. But she didn't care about none of that. She was coming to testify. They couldn't stop her. She was going to she's getting some justice for her son. But she did say now, she was afraid because in the courtroom, white men will be in there with their little sons, and their sons had little toy cap guns, and they was pointing them at her. The little boys, their sons was pointing little cap guns that going bang and shooting them at her and everything. And the fathers would be there just laughing at her because her son was dead. Wow. This is crazy. But a black man named T.R.M. Howard, also known as Dr. Howard, who was a businessman, he was a surgeon and a civil rights activist and one of the wealthiest blacks in the state. He had a big influence on that case, and he had Mamie's back, and he supported her. He was the one that got Medgar Evers and the NAACP involved on the Emmett murder case. And he brought in witnesses like Willie Reed, the one that was walking up the road that heard everything. They got him as a witness to testify, and they had to hire protection for him. And Medgar Evers even convinced Mose Wright to testify because a lot of people was telling Moses Wright, don't do it, fearing he would get killed. But that's his nephew. But Mamie was strong though. Mamie was strong. She even wrote a letter to President Dwight Eisenhower and J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, asking for their support. And guess what? They never responded because they really was on the side of the white Southerners. But that's a whole nother story. I'll do that story in the future. Now, at the trial, right, Emmett's mom, Mamie got on the stand, looking beautiful. She was a strong black woman, well-spoken, educated, and didn't back down. And she testified And she said she told her son to watch his manners, and if a situation ever to come to being asked to get on your knees to ask for forgiveness of a white person, do it. Do it without a thought. That's what she said. But then look, the defense tried to question her about the identification of her son Emmett in the casket in Chicago, and they was asking her about a $400 life insurance policy she had taken out on him and all this mess. And the Sheriff Strider, he testified for the defense, which is crazy because at first I think he helped identify Emmett's body with Moses Wright. But during the trial, he claimed Sheriff Strider, he claimed that Emmett was alive and that the body retrieved from the river was a white person. First he said it was a black person, now he said it was a white person. Wow. Then a doctor got up there and testified on the stand that the body was too decomposed to identify and had been in the water too long for it to be Emmett. But then Willie Reed went up there and told him what he heard and seen, because he actually saw them with his own eyes and heard the screams and the beatings with his own ears. Now they try to say, they told Willie Reed, you sure it wasn't a pig? Because pig grunts like a little kid or something when they squealing or something like that. What? Wow. Now, Carolyn Bryant got on the stand to tell her side of the story and tried to say, this is what she tried to say. She said Emmett grabbed her hand while she was stocking candy. She said Emmett said this to her in the store. How about a date, baby? And she walked away from him, and that's when he followed her to the cash register and then grabbed her waist and said, what's the matter, baby? Can you take it? Then she said she freed herself from him again, and Emmett told her she needn't be afraid of him because he's been with white women before, and that's when his cousins grabbed him by the arm and told him, let's go. And she claimed she was just scared for her life. Wow. But here's the crazy part. She didn't say all that and testify in front of the jury because the judge dismissed the jury from the courtroom when she testified. That way she wouldn't be under oath. That way she wouldn't be caught if she lied, perjury. She wasn't even under oath, they say. Now, Emmett's great uncle Moses Wright took the stand, and he was brave and fearless at the courthouse that day, risking his life, and he pointed right at him saying it was J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant who kidnapped Emmett from the house. They say he was one of the first black men in Mississippi to ever testify against a white person and live to tell it. Wow. But then look, in closing of the trial, right, the defense told the jury that their forefathers would turn over in their graves if they convicted Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam, because there were only 3 outcomes for them, and that was capital murder, life in prison or the death penalty, or acquittal. And by that time, all the black people in the courthouse, all around the courthouse that was in there, they just started easing away because they knew they weren't going to convict them. Plus, they started leaving anyway because if they would have said they were guilty, it was going to be a big riot and retaliation also. And Mamie said when she saw all the black people leaving before the verdict was in, she left too. Even though her lawyer was telling her with all the evidence they had on Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam, it was going to be a guaranteed guilty for them. But the jury was all white. It was 12 white men who were actually Bryant and Milam's friends from town. And after 1 hour and 5 minutes of deliberations, they were acquitted on all charges. Wow. They got them on the kidnap. They were acquitted on all the charges. And look, one of the jurors said in an interview, if they hadn't stopped to drink soda pop, it wouldn't have taken that long to acquit them. Wow. Now here's the crazy part though. Now after they beat the murder case, 4 months later, J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant did an interview and point blank admitted and told their story to Look magazine for about $4,000 a piece because they knew they couldn't get indicted for murder again because of the double jeopardy law. So they did the interview at the office of the lawyers that defended them, and in the magazine interview they straight up confessed to the whole murder. And this is what they said, right? Well, this is what J.W. Milam said anyway. He said, well, what else could we do? He was hopeless. I'm no bully. I never hurt a nigga in my life. I like niggas. In their place though. I know how to work them. But I just decided it was time a few people got put on notice. As long as I live and can do anything about it, niggas are going to stay in their place. Niggas ain't going to vote where I live because if they did, they'll control the government. They ain't going to go to school with my kids. And when a nigga gets close to mentioning sex with a white woman, he must be tired of living, and I'm likely to kill him. Me and my folks fought for this country, and we got some rights. I stood there in the shed and listened to that nigga throw that poison at me, and I just made my mind up. Chicago boy, I said, I'm tired of them sending your kind down here to stir up trouble. God damn you, I'm going to make an example of you, just so everybody can know how me and my folks stand. That's what J.W. Milam said in that Look magazine interview. Now see, the thing that really made them mad was the fact that they say Emmett wasn't scared of them. He was not scared of these guys, and he didn't think they had the guts to kill him. Now J.W. Milam also said they were never able to scare him because they had just filled him so full of that poison that he was hopeless. And look, he said when they was pistol whipping Emmett, he never hollered, cried, or nothing, and he called them bastards and told them that he was as good as they were, and then told them he had white women before and his grandmother was a white woman. That don't sound like something Emmett would say. Not to me. That's what J. Milam said according to his interview confession. I don't know. That don't sound like something Emmett would say. But then Emmett's cousin, Simeon Wright, who was actually there when Emmett was kidnapped, said William Bradford Huey's interview with Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam was full of lies, and claimed he was hiding the truth about how many people were really involved. Simeon Wright said he doesn't believe a word William Bradford Huey says. Wow. Yeah, because it don't sound like something Emmett would say. But that's what William Bradford Huey, he interviewed J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant for that interview. But first, I think he said at first it was 4 people involved. Then he said it was 2 people involved, which was J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant. So Simeon Wright was right there with Emmett in the bed, sleep when they kidnapped him. So I kind of believe him. And he said he don't believe a word about that interview. See, that interview was kind of fake. You know, in later interviews, some of the jurors really believed that Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam were guilty, but they just thought the punishment for them was too hard if found guilty. They simply did not believe that life imprisonment or the death penalty were fit punishments for whites who had killed a black man. And they also said that the prosecution had not proved that Emmett was dead, or if that really was his body that was removed from the river. Wow. So that's why they didn't find him guilty. You know, Willie Reed, you know, after he testified, he had to leave Mississippi because he was receiving a lot of death threats too. And with the help of T.R.M. Howard, Dr. Howard, the surgeon and the wealthiest black guy, he moved him to Chicago. And when he moved to Chicago, Willie Reed changed his name to Willie Lewis to avoid being found. And he later had a nervous breakdown and died on July 18th, 2013. His wife said she never knew he was involved in the case because he never talked about it. He even kept his secret from her. But everybody left Mississippi after the trial though and moved to Chicago. Even Mose Wright, because he was hurt when they found J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant not guilty, even though he knew what the outcome was going to be, that they would get off, but he still was hurt though. Plus, after the verdict, he started receiving death threats and some white supremacists came to his house. So the whole family moved to Chicago and could never really get over what happened to Emmett. I know one of Moses' sons, Maurice, he really never got over it because he kind of blamed, I ain't gonna say blame, he felt that his father, Mose Wright, should have never let it happen that same night. He felt he should have did some resistance or something, should did something, but Mose Wright was a church man though, and who knows, they might have just killed everybody in the house that night. So yeah, who knows what he was thinking. But yeah, after the trial though, man, look, J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant life turned out kind of rough, and a lot of their friends and supporters cut them off, and especially the black people, they boycotted because that's who really went to their stores and shop, and a lot of their employees were black also. But after the trial, they refused to work for them too, and they ended up bankrupt and had to close down their stores, and they lost their land because the banks wouldn't give them a loan and all of that. So, and they all moved to Texas too. But even in Texas, when they moved to Texas, people didn't like them, so they had to move back to Mississippi. And J.W. Milam got into more trouble. He caught an assault and battery charge. He was writing bad checks, and he was using a stolen credit card, and he had some health issues. And he died of spinal cancer on December 30th, 1980 at the age of 61. Now, Carolyn and Roy Bryant ended up getting divorced, and Roy Bryant years later was convicted in 1984 and 1988 of food stamp fraud. What? Wow, that's crazy. And look, in an interview, Roy Bryant, he said he lives a private life now and didn't want anyone to know his location because he feared someone in the new generation would try to kill him. And then check this though. He said, Roy Bryant said Emmett Till had ruined his life. Wow. He blamed Emmett Till for messing up his life. And in an interview, he expressed no remorse and said, Emmett Till is dead. I don't know why he just can't stay dead. And look, he later died of cancer on September 1st, 1994 at the age of 63. Now, as far as Carolyn Bryant, she got remarried, and in 2008, she did an interview for book author Timothy Tyson claiming she had fabricated parts of her testimony at the trial. Now, she said she couldn't remember a lot of what went on that day between her and Emmett in the grocery store, but she did say that nothing that Emmett did could ever justify what happened to him. She also said that Roy Bryant had been abusive towards her, and she was just scared of him because he was a mean and not kind man. That's why she lied on the stand, because she was afraid. But the crazy part is, Carolyn Bryant's family denies she ever recanted her story. And then Timothy Tyson admitted in an interview article that he did not have the bombshell quote of her confession on any of the recordings from his 2 days of interviews with Carolyn Bryant. Now, Mamie, after Emmett's death, became an activist because, see, right after Emmett's murder case, right, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus to a white person in Montgomery, Alabama. And look, Rosa said when she did that, she thought of Emmett Till, and she just couldn't go back. Plus, she had just went to a rally for Emmett Till led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which also inspired her. But later on, Mamie, she went to college and got her master's degree and became a teacher. She got remarried and continued to educate the world about her son Emmett, especially after the NAACP hired her to go on a speaking tour around the country and share what happened to Emmett. Now, Mamie, she died in 2003. And to the end, she fought for Emmett's justice, trying to get the case reopened for the FBI to investigate, in which they finally did. They did it, but she was dead when they did it. So, in 2004, the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI opened an investigation into Emmett's murder to determine if other people had been involved who might still be alive, because they was trying to say it was about 14 people may have been involved in his murder. Wow. But in 2007, new evidence from the FBI's investigation was presented to a LaFleur County grand jury in Mississippi. And look, this time, right, it was mainly all black jurors and a black prosecutor. But guess what? The jury declined to indict anyone else in connection with Emmett's murder. And the case was closed. They closed the case down now. They say the grand jury failed to find any credible evidence for charges against Carolyn Bryant and a black guy named Henry Lee Loggins. And I watched that interview Henry Lee Loggins did on YouTube, and in my opinion, I got the feeling he was involved somehow, although he denied it. But some of the things he was saying, I'm like, how do you know a lot of stuff? But he kept denying it too. So y'all can check that interview out. Henry Lee Loggins on YouTube, and tell me what y'all think. But see, Henry Lee Loggins, right, his son also did an interview. And he did say his father, Henry Lee Loggins, did help Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam kill Emmett Till. His son said he was forced. The two black guys that was on the back of the truck was forced to help. They was forced to do what Master said, or their life was at risk. They said a lot of people in Mississippi knew Henry Lee Loggins was involved in it. So I don't know, man. I know, look, on March 29th, 2022, this year, President Joe Biden signed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act into law, which means now, if anybody does a lynch, they can now face up to 30 years in prison. And the bill was passed on a 422-3 vote. Wow. And that's crazy. 3 people still didn't want this bill to pass. A 422-3 vote. And look, they've been trying to pass this bill more than 120 years after 200 failed attempts. Wow. Emmett's death, though, man, made a powerful impact on the world. And in 2017, basketball star LeBron James, he made a reference to Emmett when a racial slur was spray painted on the front gate of his house. And LeBron said being black in America is tough, and that he thinks back to Emmett Till's mom and the reason she had an open casket. She wanted to show the world what her son went through in terms of hate crime in America. Even Muhammad Ali said in his book called The Greatest, the book he put out called The Greatest, right? Muhammad Ali stated Emmett Till and him were about the same age. And a week after Emmett was murdered in Mississippi, he said he stood on the corner with a gang of boys looking at pictures of him in the black newspapers and magazines. And one, he was laughing and happy. And the other, his head was swollen and bashed in. His mother had done a bold thing. She refused to let him be buried until thousands marched past his open casket in Chicago and looked down at his mutilated body. I felt a deep kinship to him, especially when I learned he was born the same year and the day I was. My father talked about it at night and dramatized the crime. And that was from Muhammad Ali. That's what he said about it. Now, Emmett Till's cousin Simeon Wright, he put a book out titled Simeon's Story, an eyewitness account of the kidnapping of Emmett Till. So when y'all get a chance, check that book out. He actually was there. He was actually in the bed with Emmett when they came and kidnapped him. So if you're gonna read one of the books on Emmett Till, I suggest you read that one. Simeon's Story, an eyewitness account of the kidnapping of Emmett Till. So he was there. But there's a lot of books out about Emmett. So if y'all want to do some research, y'all definitely can. Emmett Till was only 14 years old. Rest in peace. Rest in heaven. Rest in paradise. Emmett Till.